So hi Maria, hi Juraj. Nice to have you here, and welcome to another interview. This time with Marie, and hopefully I pronounce your name properly, Marie.
Yep,
Marie.
perfectly fine, yeah.
Okay, as usual, we are starting with a very quick introduction, and I would like to introduce Marie as a expert in testing, especially nowadays in performance testing. She's originally from Philippines, and she was also ambassador of Cyprus, if I
Yeah.
remember properly. So it looks like she's working around front-end testing a lot. And I find out that she started as an interim consultant with Capgemini a couple of years ago. And
With
now,
Sogeti specifically. So like the
Sojeti,
sister
okay.
company, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So now it's the time to fix that introduction because I believe I nicely screw it up. So, man, could you help me?
What is the real journey?
What is the truth? Tell us the truth.
Yeah. So I first started as a graduate consultant for Sogeti.
Okay.
So Sogeti is Capgemini's like sister company. I think even until now. And this was like straight after uni. I basically was not aware that you can have a career in software testing. And so I found out that there was a graduate program being offered by Sujeti. I applied, and yeah, like that's how it started. Because initially I thought that after graduation, all the jobs would just be about developers, like being a software developer or working like as a database analyst. It wasn't really widely shared to us as students that you can have
Mhm.
a career as a software tester. So, yep, I guess yeah, it was one of those accidental moments where if it wasn't for that graduate program, I wouldn't be in software testing now.
And that was already in UK, or you did it from Philippines, or how
That
it
was
was?
already here in the UK. So that was 2013. So right after
Mhm.
graduation, yeah.
Oh, and what did you do there? What was the job
So the
about?
first, yeah, so because we didn't really, have any formal knowledge about software testing. So like the first couple of, weeks or months is really about learning, the fundamentals, like doing our IS like TQB certifications, and just really learning about, the different types of testing. And like during that time as well, so we were um doing a lot of like just training, like with the
Mhm.
other graduate like students. And then after that, I think it was like a 6 weeks intensive training, if I'm not mistaken. Then after that, we get assigned to different projects.
Mhm.
And during like the first year, so I stayed with them for a year. I was working as a graduate test consultant for a government project that I was part of before. And then after that, like, because at some point I wanted to apply what I learned at uni in terms of like the programming. My colleague at the time, so he was one of our contractors in this government project. He showed me like what Selenium is about, that you can automate tests as well, that you can write code and then it will replay the actions. So I was interested towards that because I figured, okay, I studied programming, I might as well use it so I don't forget like how to code.
Okay, so what was the first language with Selenium you used?
That
Java
was
or
with Java.
Python?
Yeah.
Java.
Yeah. So I studied Java back at
Mhm.
uni, so it just made sense because it was still very familiar. So I started like, yeah, doing my first script with Selenium and Java, just visiting, like the Google homepage and then
Uh-huh.
searching for a keyword. And yeah, that's how it started. And then after a year of working as a test consultant, I decided that I want to be more on the technical test engineer role.
Mhm.
So luckily, one person that I went to uni with, he also did a software testing route, but he's more on the automation side. So
Mhm.
he approached me and asked, "Hey, we seem to be on, the same field. We're looking for technical test engineers. Is this something that you're interested in?" And that's how I started with the, test automation, with more, I guess, now working with different technologies, not just with Selenium and Java, but also exploring like other test automation tools.
And then how did you end up in Cyprus? Because I noticed that you was I don't know whether it was with Cyprus or the ambassador role is some
Yeah,
external kind of position, but
yeah. So, um, after my maternity leave, so I wasn't working for 7 to 8 months. I was put into a project, specifically like a JavaScript project. They were using WebDriver IO, and
Mhm.
like after you go on maternity leave, like you completely forget like a lot of things. Like you became really rusty.
Uh-huh.
And then that time, I was searching for, tools, like, like trying to refresh, like
Mhm.
what's happened now. Like, now that I'm back, like, is there
Uh-huh.
any new tools? And one of the tools, like, this was like 2017. So Cypress was still, like in its very early stages. And that's when I started playing around with it. But during that time, it was still very in its early stages. There's still not a lot of features. So I couldn't really apply it as a POC yet in the new project that I
Mhm.
was part of, because there was still a lot of missing functionalities. It's still not very mature as it is now. But that was my first experience, with Cypress. And then ever since then, I've just started following, the project. I really enjoyed, how simple it was to get started,
Mhm.
because like
Mm.
my personal experience with, other tools is it takes a lot of time, setting up, a lot of time getting started. So I spent most of my time, trying to get started rather than writing the test. And then
Mhm.
being on that, you know, maternity leave gap, I really just wanted to, okay, how can I, provide as much value as I can in terms of writing tests? Like I don't want to learn, a lot of the setup, a lot of the config. And that's when I learned that,
Mhm.
Cypress really offers this, simple developer experience. And luckily enough, so I got moved into a new project, a new greenfield project. So we were working on a design system, and we had, full option, like full authority to basically select like the appropriate
Mhm.
tools. And because we want developers to also help with writing the automated tests, we made the proposal to, rather than using existing tools that, the QA engineers are using, why not use something as well that developers will use, so that the responsibility is shared. My manager said yes, so yeah, we finally managed to introduce Cypress into that project. And I think, like, in terms of like the overall feedback from, the developers, like they were able to write like not just functional tests, but, with, Cypress's like different plugins, we were able to introduce accessibility tests easily, component tests easily, visual tests as well. So that just, yeah, really made the whole sort of experience much better. And then think January 2020, so just before the pandemic, I
Uh-huh.
heard about the Cypress Ambassador Program.
Uh-huh.
Um, by that time, I already spoke at my first in-person meetup, and this was about, introducing Cypress. And then I've written a few blog posts. So I started writing blog posts late 2019. My manager convinced me as well, hey, you should start sharing your knowledge. And because I've had few evidence already of me advocating for Cyprus, even though like they weren't asking me to
Mhm.
advocate for it, I was just trying to share what I've learned, and also a way for me to remember how I've done stuff. I applied to the program, not really expecting that I would, get accepted. And yeah, they said, hey, I think, we think you'll be a great fit to be a Cyprus ambassador, and yeah, the rest is history.
And how it happened that you then switched to K6? Because I
Mm,
think,
yeah.
and I
Yeah,
saw the very
yeah. So like
clear edge to
yeah,
moving to the
it's very
K6.
like it's like a different jump, isn't it?
Mm,
So
Yeah.
um the jump to K6, this was like a very long time in terms of actually like making it happen. So I've been speaking with my now colleague Nicole for about 2 years. So she's been trying
Uh-huh.
to say, hey, we think you'll be a good fit as a developer advocate, but then by that time I've switched jobs already. So I work as a quality engineering manager at like my
Mhm.
previous role in at Zoopla, which is a property price company, like where you can buy or sell houses.
Mhm.
And I like doing the developer advocacy, I wasn't made aware that I was already doing that. I didn't
Mhm.
know that the speaking at meetups or conferences, the learning in public, writing blog posts is part of developer advocacy, because um I think developer advocacy has some confusion in terms of what it is. When I first heard about the term, I thought that you need to be a developer to be a developer
Mhm.
advocate, but actually that's not really the case. And K6 is one of the tool that I've used extensively in the past. So it's not the same tool as Cypress. It's more on the performance and like load testing. So on my previous role, we were using K6, but then like from a functional test perspective, from a visual testing perspective, we were still using Cypress with like other tools. But when it comes to load testing, K6 has had been the standard that we have put into place when it comes to
Mhm.
testing like the different like APIs that we were responsible of. So I was also writing content about K6. I did, like a virtual meetup about like introductory episode on how to use K6. And I think because my colleague Nicole has been a big advocate as well of,
Mhm.
hey, I think we really need to get her. She'll be perfect when it comes to advocating the browser aspect of
mm,
K6. So um, to anyone who doesn't know, so K6 now has the ability to, automate browser like actions, and then get front end performance metrics. So not just
Mhm.
back end metrics, but we're now also able to gather front end performance.
We will come to that soon. I will just
Yeah,
trying to
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
keep the structure.
yeah,
But you looks like you are pretty busy because today with Marcel, we are your biggest stalkers today, and we are trying to find them as much as possible about you. But it
yeah.
looks that you don't have a free
It's a
time.
lot, yeah.
You are
And I
creating the
think,
blogs, post videos.
yeah.
How looks your free time, or how you are keeping the mental healthy?
I mean, I've been much better. So I have to admit, like, previous years, like I would just say yes to everything. I would stay up, really late. But now I am much better. Like I've learned how to say no to some other activities. Like I have a limit of, how many events I can prioritize. And I think this is one of the main reason why I jumped to the developer advocacy role, because when I was working as the quality engineering manager, I love my day role, but at the same time, I was doing a lot of things on the side, the developer advocacy side. And that's something I really enjoyed. And I just, felt that, okay, maybe going forward, why not make that as my main job? If, I'm quite passionate with it, I'm quite good at it. So why not, make it as my main? And my role now as a developer advocate for K6 makes that, like possible.
It sounds like when your like daily job is your hobby, it's difficult to find some other hobbies
Yeah.
because you are so fall in love with the
Mhm.
stuff from daily job. So maybe talking about that hobbies, is that new podcast you are now building or publishing your hobby or your work?
Um, I would say it's not really related to work because we don't talk about K6, but it's just more of um like how can we share or how can we have a voice more in terms of, being a woman in tech plus also being an immigrant like working, in tech, because I feel like because there's already not a lot of women in tech. So if myself and my colleague Nicole share more about our experiences, then maybe we can help other women network with other women. So it's more of like a project that like we've been really thinking of doing, but then
Mhm.
we didn't had, I guess, the time, or not the time, but we were just like we were always just pushing it to the side, because even when I was on my previous role, I've always wanted to do a podcast. Like I was talking to my other
Mhm.
female colleagues and, asking them, hey, do you think, having a podcast about this would be like a good idea?
Mhm.
And now, I was able to make it happen. So I wouldn't say it's part of work, but then I've included it as part of my work because it's also advocating for women.
Okay.
That in tech there's also other areas that you can participate in. It's not just about coding, but if you want to explore other areas of tech, then there's other technical skills that you can develop, and it's not just about coding all the time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I find it pretty interesting idea, and I found it by accident when I was preparing for this discussion. So what I'll do, I'll put the link to the to that. I don't know whether to call it podcast because it's actually
It's
the
a live stream. Yeah. we
YouTube
were
channel.
we were going to trial YouTube's podcast feature, but I don't know if we're using it like correctly. So
Mhm.
but basically we're just like live streaming it, like make it
Mhm.
so that the conversations are also natural. But maybe in the future we'll just download the audio recording and upload it as a podcast as well.
Okay, so I'll place the link I found to the description of this video once we publish it. And now maybe it's time to move from this being ambassador of Cyprus to being advocate of K6 and talking more about K6. I don't know whether we need some introduction about the tool because I think it's already famous tool, at least for me. I know the tool.
I mean, the
So
introduction should be nice because still a lot of people are using different options, and it should be nice to introduce the K6.
Yeah. Okay, yep, I can give like a quick intro. So, I think with, K6, like it's one of those tools that I remember comparing it to Cypress in a from the perspective of they're both trying to improve developer experience. Like when you look at Cypress's tagline, there's something about developer experience, and then when you look at K6, there's also developers like the best developer experience for like load testing. So I think both tools are trying to solve the problem of, hey, how can we include developers within like the testing like space as well, because
mhm,
I think with the introduction of like earlier tools, there was that barrier, but now it's much more modern, like it's much more like easier to set up. So I think both tools share the same like feature from that perspective. Just to differentiate, so K6, it's a load and performance testing tool. K6 in itself is written in Go, but then the
mhm,
tests are written in JavaScript or TypeScript. So again, it leads to that sort of like coding familiarity, because most people are quite familiar with writing JavaScript, and it also like tries to get the developers experience like much better, because most developers are also quite like fluent in using JavaScript.
mhm,
So the way K6 works is like I guess it's quite similar with other load testing tools. um but then like apart from just measuring like the backend performance, K6 is also trying to you know um increase its scope, so that it also covers things like chaos testing, browser testing. Later we have and we have like a K6 office hours episode
Mhm.
where we're going to talk about how can you do like schema validation, checks with K6. So we're trying to also expand to other use cases. Yeah.
Nice. So just maybe I can continue that, that for a long time, that key six like focus on the backend performance testing, and now you are moving or you move to the performance testing. What are the reasons why you moved there?
Yeah. So I think like in order to get that holistic view of, your application's performance, like it's not enough to just, check the backend performance. Like it has advantages. So it's much, faster than, checking, I guess if you're doing browser based, load testing, like that is more resource intensive. Whereas if we do like protocol level, it's much more faster, and you can, you know, try to measure your applications like reliability, like scalability, all those things. But then at the same time, if you want to test like your overall user experience, so from what your user actually sees, so they interact with the browser, then you also need to have some, like front end performance checks. And the main reason now that K6 is also doing web performance or like browser automation. So the backend side of things, it's now very mature, and so we want to also expand to other use cases of, like performance testing, to make sure that we can also offer that to our users. And one approach that, we have been like speaking about in a lot of our, documentation, or, like office hours episode, is this hybrid approach to performance testing,
Mm-hmm.
where you spin up most of your, virtual users, like you spin up most of your traffic on the protocol level, but then simultaneously you have one or two browser users who's accessing, your website, and then checking what's the experience for them if the backend is currently operating at this load. So you can get, both view, like basically both sides of the coin when it comes to performance testing.
Do you also support mobile apps, or this is just for browser or
Just
on the
for
web?
browser for now, yeah. So K6 browser was just introduced, I think, 2021, late 2021, if I'm
Mhm.
not mistaken. So it's still a very experimental module. So for now, it's just focused on websites.
Okay, now the difficult question. Could you imagine that you wouldn't use Cypress for UI testing and you would fully move to K6? Is it ready already for this kind of approach or?
Yeah. It's funny that you asked that. So I remember, so in K6 we have this thing called week of load testing. So as a new joiner, you get to learn about, K6, like, and then present that to your like colleagues. I didn't focus on the back end part of K6. I focus on like the K6 browser. And one of the feedback that, I put on was like other tools like, Cypress and Playwright, like they are more mature. But then, like, I think there is no way for us to compete, with these tools, because the problem that we're trying to solve is quite different. Like we're trying to offer that, hybrid performance testing, where you want to have a singular script for
Mhm.
writing your browser level and protocol tests. With Cypress, you can measure your front end performance using, plugins like the Cypress Audit, which basically allows you to measure like the lighthouse, like how you
Mhm.
see it in lighthouse. So you
Mm-hmm.
see a measure of like the web vitals. But then in terms of like the data that it's using, so Google Lighthouse is using lab data. So data that is from a, controlled environment. So it's not exactly what your users are seeing. Whereas in, in K6, we're using a different library called the Web Vital JS library, which essentially allows us to, gather real user data, because we have an API to actually let
Mhm.
let users do, like interaction like with, the website. So it's coming from like a real user monitoring data perspective. So I can argue that you can use both tools. So you
Mm-hmm.
can use Cypress for monitoring your lab data with Google
Mhm.
Lighthouse, and of course there's also other features of Cypress that you can use. But if you want a measure of, your application's data from a field perspective, so from an actual user, and you also want to measure the backend performance at the same time, then I would use K6 for that. So it's not really about competing, it's like trying to solve different like
Mhm.
problems. Yeah.
So you still feel that Cypress would be efficient in some cases to do the UI testing?
Yeah, we've actually had like not a feature request, but in our community forum, someone actually asked, "Hey, is it possible to make some sort of like Cypress extension with K6 so I can reuse the scripts that I've done for
Mhm.
Cypress and convert that, to K6?" So, there's some possibility like in the future, but I think for now, because K6 browser is still in its very early stages, like we're just trying to make the API as stable as possible, and like trying to support the most important features like for our users. So there's still gonna be quite a few changes. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and if you're discussing on this monitoring and the result of the cases that maybe we are using in our organization like wrong approach, but is there maybe some data source how to use it in Grafana? Because now Grafana Labs, is maybe big boost for K6, but
Yeah.
is there plan some, direct, data source for Grafana and to present or visualize the result in Grafana?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's also another, like you perfectly said it, like that bonus of, K6 now being part of Grafana Labs. Like we have, access to easily, use other like Grafana Labs like products. And now K6 Cloud is also natively part of like the Grafana Cloud experience as
No,
well. So
okay.
it makes it simpler in terms of combining performance and also observability.
Okay, this is why probably we have the wrong approach because we are using this free version. I have to discuss in the company to pay for this version.
Yeah.
Then you
And
also
there is
mentioned that the chaos testing part is also interesting because also we are using this chaos. What is maybe the future? What is the plan of the key six? Because we started with this backend, then we
Yeah.
moved to web perf. Now chaos is it's like growth very very fast to different
Yeah.
areas.
Yeah, so it's actually part of my like learning objective for this quarter, because I want to learn about, chaos testing in general, and how, so K6 has an extension called XK6 Disruptor, which allows you to inject faults into your
Mhm.
application, and then you can basically check like what is the limit as to like
Mm-hmm.
which like this error is like showing. So I think in terms of like future, so um now that we've understand that there's also other aspects of, application that's like important from, having that great user experience, it's not just about testing your backend performance. So I think K6 is gonna slowly evolve into a reliability testing tool, so that it can also cover, other areas of, like testing. And I think the beauty with that is, if you just want to combine, different types of testing approaches, I think that's what K6 is trying to, solve. So if you want to combine browser with chaos testing, then, that could be made possible by combining K6 browser with the XK6 disruptor. Or if you want to combine, just the K6 core with, the K6 browser, then now we can also like support that. So it's about, I guess, having that simpler sort of approach of not using a lot of different tools. And I haven't done much chaos testing, but I've heard that, you know, the sort of, setup, like the learning process for that is quite difficult. Don't like quote me on that, because I haven't done personally, but just from what I've heard from other people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think XK6 Disruptor is trying to make that learning process a bit simpler, which I'm gonna prove this quarter to see how quick it is for me to learn the extent.
Yeah. And then that I don't know if you know this information, but a lot of people are still asking if the key six will be still free or will be the plan to move everybody to the paid license.
No, like I think with K6. So one of my key important, role as a developer advocate is to
Mm.
always focus on the OSS
Okay.
side. Yeah, so K6 will always be, free. It will always have the OSS version. The K6 Cloud, like is there
Mm-hmm.
like the paid version. Obviously, if you want to, access like more features, but
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're just getting started and if you want to use your own
Mhm.
infrastructure, then K6 OSS is more than enough.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And currently, the UI just is something for beginners or somebody who would like to start maybe with K6 is much more easier how to start. Is there plan maybe move to the free version, or maybe what are your recommendation for people who would like to start with K6?
Yeah, I think in terms of recommendation, so I'm not just saying this because I work for them, but even before started, even before I started using K6, like their documentation for me, it was really, useful compared to like other tools that I've done. So I guess my first recommendation, so if you're already familiar with like principles when it comes to performance testing, then I would highly suggest, to go to our K6 documentation. There's a lot of important like testing guides as well that, the team is always trying to improve on. Because I think you need like first you need to understand like the different principles when it comes to performance testing, and then after that the tooling approach would be easier. And I think in terms of like other recommendations, so just try and like play around with it like as much as you can, like see what will happen if you change, say for example if you increase a number of virtual users or if you increase a number of like duration, and then see how that impacts your APIs. Like nowadays there's a lot of like test APIs that you can use for just practicing like performance testing as well. So yeah, like just play around with it, like and then see firsthand any issues. And then if you get stuck on anything, so the community forum support from K6 is quite helpful. Our developers are always like trying to help with as much queries as possible.
Yeah, and you mentioned also that it's based on Go, but we have to start. People have to use the JavaScript of writing the
Yeah.
code. Is there some? Can we expect maybe support for another languages? Because you mentioned that you are like Java skill. That what is
this
there the
is
plans?
this is one of like the most frequently asked questions. But I think like, so it's not technically impossible, but then it's gonna be like really difficult. So I think like there is even a blog post that one of my colleague wrote on why you know K6 won't be a multi like language support. So maybe after this I can share it, like, and we
Mhm.
can add it as part of like the
Good, yes,
description
yes.
or something. But he's made some really like compelling arguments as to why we won't ever be supporting multiple languages. So I think it's safe to say that for now it really will just be like JavaScript.
Okay,
I'm watching the time, and I think we are exceeding that limits we
really,
promised
I'm not
our
surprised.
Already.
So maybe we should move on now from the K6 to the last section, which is promotion and advertisement, or saying hello to our friends. So if you have any announcements or promotion you would like to share at the end, then now it's the time.
Yeah, so I guess just personal promotion first. So I'll be speaking at Global Tester Summit 2023, which is a virtual event. So maybe I can share all these, links afterwards, but I'll be talking about the hybrid approach to performance testing. More on like the conceptual, on like the theory side of things rather than how to actually do it. So just to give more information to people as to what this hybrid performance testing is. So I believe it's a free virtual event, so it's gonna be held the 15th and 16th of May, so next week. And then after that, so I'll also be doing a performance testing 101 workshop with Live to Test 2023. So we'll look at how you can get started with performance testing, what are the different, I guess, important testing types that you need to learn from a performance perspective. Then I'll, do a quick demo on, how you can use Lighthouse for the web performance. So basically just use the built-in like Chrome DevTools option, and
Mhm.
then how to get started with K6. And finally, so if you're in Athens, so by the end of this month, so I'll be speaking at Ministry of Testing, Athens, with Richard Bradshaw as well, who's boss at
Yeah.
Ministry of Testing. So again, it will be about the hybrid approach, but I'll also do a code demonstration on how to use K6 browser. And then some other shout outs. So I would just like to give a shout out to my really good friend Rafaela Acevedo. So she is such an inspiration, to every woman. She's currently co-founding a startup about Web3 and blockchain, which I
Mhm.
don't have any, clue about, but she's doing it. She's like really experimenting like with a lot of things. So I think, yeah, there's so many women out there who's really trying to break into tech. And I think, which is one of the sort of reason why we created the Adobo and Avocados, podcast, is because we want to feature, more women in tech out there. Because I guess from like different companies' perspective, every time I see that there's still a lot of, men working in a project, like there's so many talented women out there as well. So it's just really giving them the voice and giving them the platform to, promote themselves as well. So yeah, that's all. That's
Yeah.
all the promotion I can think
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. So if you share all the links, I'll add it to the video description.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether Juraj would like to promote or mention something.
I would like to also promote, the biggest conference here in Slovakia for software engineers, CodeCon 2023, next week, 11th of May in Bratislava. Also, two speakers from Multitude IoT Labs will be on the stage. That I'm
Nice.
really happy that my guys are going there and will share like great experience and knowledge to the whole community. That this is like my big promotion. I'm really proud that my guys are also there, open to speak on the conference.
Cool. I will not promote today because we are
Ah,
overrunning time.
now I'm surprised. Now I'm surprised.
Yeah, but I hope it was fun for you. Thank you very much, Mari, coming. Thank
Thank you
you,
so
Juraj,
much.
Thank
Yeah.
you
coming
very
to the
much.
call.
Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you so much for having me. I had so much fun.
And hopefully we'll get some new subscribers and likes under the video.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you and bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.